Good afternoon. I'm here on the virtual Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer, and my guest today is Dr. Matthew E. Henry, and he wrote a book, Teaching While Black. Matthew is a multiple Pushcart and Best of the Net nominated poetry short story writer. His works have appeared in Radical Teacher, Rhino, Spillway, and many others. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell me, as a teacher, I'm a teacher, but especially you as a teacher, how hard it is to keep a public cool in an upper class suburban school with all that's going on?
I don't know that I keep my cool very well. I try. I'm generally really honest with my kids about everything. And so they will come to me and ask me very pointed questions at times about what I think about things. And while remaining professional, I'm still very honest with them. And giving them my experience as just bluntly, sometimes one of the few Black men adults that they have actually met and know, like have a personal relationship with. So I tell them things and try to be a.
Like, what do you tell them?
So
where is this? At Wellesley? At Wellesley? You teach in Wellesley or something? Or?
I teach in Weston. Actually, I used to go to school in Wellesley for a little bit.
Yeah.
So I mean, like for example, there's some of the poems that are in Teaching While Black while the poems on a whole are from my whole 18 years of teaching, and some are mixed in there. There are certain poems that are specifically from my time in Weston. So there's one example is a poem that's called "When Asked Why All Lives Don't Matter." And that is loosely, but largely at the same time, based off of a real classroom conversation that I had with my students around why the phrase all lives matters is problematic. And so I borrowed something from my own life with my own family as an illustration of that. And it helped click for certain kids. So that'd be an example.
Okay. So, I mean, you say for some kids, this is the first experience they've had with a Black man. How do they react? I mean, mostly it's just.
I mean, again, it's dependent on where I've worked. In some places, I'll stick with Weston in particular. There have been moments where I've had students who have switched out of my class because I was the Black man standing there, like day one, day two, and they were out. There have been others who have been like, wow, this is a cool novelty. And others who are absolutely fine with it. They're like,
yeah, so it's a very situation.
Yeah.
You were part of the of Metco, which bused students from the inner city into the suburbs. You write about being in third grade and a white teacher gave you an explanation about your skin. This sort of ignited the ember in you. Could you tell us a bit about that? You wrote a poem about that.
Sure. The poem is like 7 lines long. I can read it real quick.
Yeah.
My third grade teacher explained skin, the undercurrents of blood, and how my face lacked the ability to bruise or blush. I tried to show her a patch darker than the rest. She nodded, explained it was harder to see on my skin. And that last part is a direct quote. I mean, like that's one of the stories that actually happened. We're having our lesson on capillaries and blood vessels, and I said, oh, I have a bruise. And I showed her a bruise on my arm. She's like, well, you can't bruise. And it literally took me years, decades, being a teacher, teaching teachers for it to dawn on me. I know I wasn't the first Black student that she's had. There was no way that she hadn't said this thing over and over and over again before I pointed out the explanation you gave about how blood vessels work wouldn't be different for a Black child. How many times has she just been going off of that understanding that, well, no, Black people can't bruise, and like, where did she learn it? And how many people did she teach it to year after year after year? So yeah, that is something that stuck with me from third grade until, for decades. And it in some ways really did start inspiring my writing and thinking about public education and race in a different way.
One might say from great pain is great writing.
Oh, definitely. I say that to my students on a regular basis.
Right. Excuse me, my notes here. You made reference to the great Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes, particularly his poem Harlem. Harlem asked whether a dream deferred explodes. Do you think you your writing explodes, and certainly the country has.
In some ways, I want to say I hope so. A lot of my poetry, both in this collection and others that I'm working on, refer back to that poem, and that idea of whether things under pressure eventually just explode. I want my poetry to explode. I want people to read something that I've written and it blows something in their mind up, potentially in a different way than the way they've been thinking about it previously. If it changes action, if it changes attitude, I feel like I've done my job in some way. But on another level, my poems are just me exploding, like me needing to get something off of my chest. And the good teacher that I hope I am, it's communicating to people in a way that they will also change their actions or way of thinking.
Now tell me, you're pretty honest about some of your students, and you express anger in your poems to some of your students, their ignorance or their, whatever. And what has been the reaction from your colleagues and administrators about your book?
In public, it has been very supportive. In private, one of my colleagues pulled me aside, and it was completely out of love and like concern. Like, he stopped me and he was like, "Are you going to be okay? Like, when the powers that be or parents or whoever start coming at you, like, are you prepared for that?" And I actually had multiple colleagues who came and asked me the same question. They all my English teacher friends and history department friends also, they all have my back, and they know, I knew that they have me. No one has said anything publicly negative. What is said behind closed doors, what may or may not have been posted on Facebook that I'm not privy to, I don't know. But administration has been good so far, and my colleagues have been good so far.
Now, right. So there's no layoff notice or anything like that being sent.
So far.
Right. Yeah. What I was going to ask you is to read from your work, possible. We have plenty of time. So read a selection from your new book and maybe any new work that you might have.
Sure. I'm going to start with a poem entitled Muscle Memory.
Okay.
Muscle memory. When asked about the rampant sexism in our school, my students calmly explain the science of perpetual motion machines, how easily some things are swept under the social rug. Arms finally attuned to the associative task. Lift, sweep, lift, sweep, lift. Spilt milk and skinned knees, they said. Like pipe bombs in the Belfast of my youth. Suicide vests in Gaza. School shootings in every white town USA. An average Tuesday. Eyes ahead, they file past the covered bodies and head to AP Stats. Another one of the poems is entitled Lady Macbeth. Auditory and visual hallucinations, she explains casually, as if describing the weather of California in July. 4 months into the semester, and I've just learned these familiar fiends have always been present. A strange infirmity, she says, nothing to those who know her. I don't know what she sees above our heads. The teeth and talons, the gory locks which shake between thin spaces to a rhythm only she can hear. Demons, she says. Ghosts. Transfixed, she stares into the horrible shadows which descend like a summer's cloud. There are no other outward signs. The fits are momentary. Soon she will again be well. But as we read, as other students keep their seats around our table, seeing only the blood Macbeth finds on the murderer's cheek, I wonder if she knows her mettle. How brave it is to sit in the midst, to daily behold such sights without a blush, without a shudder. The brains dashed out, the marrowless bones, the accusing empty eyes, and the blood, the waist-high blood through which she must wade. This other poem I had alluded to earlier, it's called When Asked Why All Lives Don't Matter. After a deep breath, I attempted to explain. My aunt had breast cancer. Despite a healthy dose of science and scripture, prayer and prescriptions, the shadow never dimmed. We celebrated her life, mourned the hole her grave dug in ours. We lauded her loving kindness, questioned the natural shocks flesh is heir to, why this disease would claim a wife, a coworker, a friend, an aunt. At the repast, heads turned to the future, saving other sons and daughters, ourselves. A collection was taken to fund breast cancer research. A medical scholarship for oncology study discussed. A proposal for new. From the back of the church hall, a woman no one recognized screamed, "What about ovarian cancer and prostate cancer? Why aren't you all talking about those? All cancer matters." Most of my students nodded into the ensuing silence. But some blank stares and my job description doomed me to be more didactic, to explain appropriate time, place, and manner, intent versus impact, the guilt and shame required to derail communal grief and hijack a narrative to make oneself more comfortable. I explained the human duty to choose. Enter the room willing to bear bodies on shoulders, or, arms empty, leave and silently stand outside. I said, replace cancer with lives, and waited. And one last one I'll read. It's called In Locus Parentis, or In the Place of the Parents. You never operate without a net. It's why you message me, drunk, at 1:39 a.m. on New Year's Day to finish a conversation we were only having in your head. One you won't confess between classes or after school, afraid safety is a blanket soaked in kerosene wrapped around your shoulders, a match held in eyes that see, ears that hear too much of who you are. I don't know yet. What resolution are you fighting now? What thin, trembling line holds your weight tonight?
You know, you were published by the Main Street Rag. I go way back with them. I had a poem in their journal. They're really, and a lot of people, real fine poets, are published by this gentleman. It's been a good experience, I imagine.
Yes, very much so.
Does anyone from the audience here have a question for our guest? No? Okay, well, it was a short but sweet, and thank you so much for joining us on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer, Dr. Matthew Henry, author of Teaching While Black.
Thank you very much for having me.